In America, politics and business are two separate worlds. Politicians make laws, CEOs make profits. But now, that's all changing.
We are on a fast track to climate disaster. Major cities underwater, unprecedented heat waves, terrifying storms, widespread water shortages, the extinction of 1 million species of plants and animals. And this is not fiction or exaggeration. It is what science tells us will result from our current energy policies.
We need $4.5 trillion per year to make this transition, and that can only come by unlocking access to private capital.
I ran for president because I believe we're in a battle for the soul of this nation. And the simple truth is, our soul will be troubled as long as systemic racism is allowed to persist.
A movement has been growing to unite corporations, governments, and global institutions. Its purpose is to deal with issues like climate change, racism, inequality, and gun control. It is called ESG.
You have to bring capitalism to the task. Charity can't do it, governments can't do it. You have to bring the innovation, the capital, the experience in public-private partnerships along with all those players.
Let's also be clear. The future is not just happening. The future is built by us, by a powerful community as you here in this room. We have the means to improve the state of the world.
It's now becoming increasingly difficult to tell where the private sector ends and the government begins. We're seeing a merger of the two.
What is ESG? How does it work? And how will it change our lives?
This is a massive campaign that has already metastasized to almost all of the corporate world.
With Wall Street at its center, the ESG movement includes the world's largest banks, investment managers, pension funds, and insurance companies, as well as international organizations like the World Economic Forum. The ESG industry has reached a massive $55 trillion in assets and is projected to grow to nearly $100 trillion by 2025. More than 500 of the world's largest corporations in industries like finance, tech, and media have signed pledges to support this movement.
Well, behaviors are going to have to change, and this is one thing we're asking companies. You have to force behaviors, and at BlackRock we are forcing behaviors.
Will this movement succeed in turning corporations into agents of morality and social change? Are we bending Wall Street to our will, or are we the ones who will be manipulated?
If you can control the financial markets, if you can control the access to capital, you can dictate to any industry in the United States the way things are going to be run. They have a terrifying level of control over individual people and what they can do.
Will we, as customers and shareholders, be in control of banks and tech companies? Or are we giving them the power to control us?
If your truck is being used in these protests, your corporate accounts will be frozen. The insurance on your vehicle will be suspended. The consequences are real, and they will bite.
Will governments and corporations decide what we can say?
It shouldn't come as any surprise that we're in regular touch with social media platforms, just like we're in regular touch with all of you and your media outlets about areas where we have concern. So we're regularly making sure social media platforms are aware of the latest narratives dangerous to public health.
I mean, now, of course, you've had the actual suppression and censorship of stories that the big tech companies, for political reasons, don't like.
They don't have a problem with hate speech. They just hate speech. They hate free speech. They don't want people to disagree with them.
Will they decide what we buy, how we travel, what we eat?
24% of the emissions are agriculture and meat-related emissions. You know, I fund things like Impossible Foods, Beyond Meat. Can you tell it's artificial meat or not? If you can tell, we're in big trouble.
The Netherlands is one of the breadbaskets of Europe, and so what's happening there, cutting back fertilizer use significantly, is going to bankrupt tons of small farmers, concentrate power in large conglomerates, but also radically reduce the amount of food that's created.
Have corporations become an enforcement arm of government, doing what the government cannot legally do?
Government is able to use those companies to do through the back door what government could not accomplish through the front door under the Constitution, because we have this pesky thing in this country called the First Amendment that says if you're the government, you can't censor speech. Well, you know what? We'll be nicer to these companies if they censor the content that we don't want to see on the internet.
The mainstream of American society recognizes that we're dealing with something very dangerous here. They may not understand all the intricacies of how it works, and who's involved, and what the end goal is, but they recognize something's very wrong here.
We've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin.
ESG was created to bring corporations together and make them part of a global movement to create a better world. But what is it? That depends who you ask.
ESG is actually really simple. All you need to think of it is environmental. How do companies treat the planet? Social. How do companies treat people? Governance. How are companies being run? If you're at all interested in climate change, equal pay for men and women, or bribery and corruption at companies, or modern slavery, then ESG investing is for you because it encompasses all of those things.
Fundamentally, ESG and sustainability, in simplest terms, means creating the future we want.
It's a framework for assessing risk.
The sustainability revolution is the single largest business and investing opportunity in the entire history of the world.
ESG, real or marketing?
It's a complete fraud.
And we had about 448 different ESG-related company engagements with boards and executive management last year. For us, it's much more of a risk mitigation tool.
It's a fraud because it's not better for shareholders. It's not better for stockholders. Look, JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs both announced they're not going to do lending in the Arctic for drilling. I mean, how is that better for the shareholders of Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan?
The ESG industry has tripled in size over the past 8 years, growing from $19 trillion in assets in 2014 to $55 trillion today. By 2025, ESG investments are projected to grow to more than half of all global assets under management. Who are the players in this system? ESG activists include the world's largest asset managers, who together control more than $20 trillion in investments. It includes America's largest public pension funds. It includes the world's largest banks. It includes global clubs of CEOs and political leaders, like the World Economic Forum. And it includes a host of other activists' finance clubs, such as Climate Action 100+, the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, and the Net Zero Asset Management Initiative. Companies who join these clubs sign pledges to use their corporate power to reduce fossil fuel production in favor of things like wind and solar energy and electric cars.
Means a large group of asset managers have taken these factors into account when deciding how to invest their money, but not just how to invest their money, but when they invest their money in companies, what principles they have to use as a shareholder to advocate for policies in corporate America's boardrooms. It means that a company like Apple has to vote on whether or not it's going to adopt a racial equity audit proposal at its company. As it did earlier this year, it passed with majority shareholder support, including the support of BlackRock.
So As You Sow is a nonprofit, and we engage companies. We engage companies on issues including climate change, racial justice, ocean plastics, antibiotics in meat, pesticides, all kinds of different issues. And what we do is we sit down with companies, we bring them a lot of research, and we try to help them identify material risk and help them to address it. And most of the time, they say, thank you, you guys are like McKinsey for free, and they go off to reduce risk. Sometimes the companies don't want to make any changes, so we escalate by filing what are called shareholder resolutions. So in 2022, we had 196 engagements. And of those, about half of the companies said, thank you, let's go get to work. 99 did not, and so we filed 99 resolutions. Of those, about half, once we filed it, said, you know, we really don't want all our shareholders to be thinking and talking about this. Let's go get to work. So we had about 50 resolutions that were voted on. And of those, we had 10 majority votes, and about $2 trillion worth of shares were voted yes on our resolutions.
The goals of ESG include disinvestment in fossil fuels, cutting pollution from farming, reducing the use of gas-powered cars, subsidizing wind, solar, and electric cars, fighting for social justice, racial and gender equity, DEI training, diversifying corporate boards by race and gender, taking a stand on abortion, gun control, voting laws, and transgender rights. The World Economic Forum is perhaps the most prominent of the many global clubs that back the ESG movement. It brings corporate executives and politicians together once a year in Switzerland to agree how they will cooperate for common goals. Its founder and leader is a man named Klaus Schwab.
World Economic Forum at the moment is mobilizing all its communities, also in preparation of our annual meeting in 21, related to the definition and design of policies which we have to follow in the post-corona era. We all know we need to make the world more resilient, more inclusive, and more sustainable. So the stakeholder concept, and particularly the ESGs, are a very important part of getting business involved.
Who are the members of the World Economic Forum? According to their website, 100 of the world's largest corporations have signed on as strategic partners. This includes the most dominant companies in banking and insurance, credit cards, energy, food, technology, heavy industry, manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, consulting, and consumer goods. Other strategic partners include George Soros's Open Society Foundations and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, all working together to promote ESG.
Our research shows that companies that do well on ESG end up doing better or fail less. But the most important thing, it aligns capital. It aligns capitalism. It defines capitalism the way that people want to define it, which is stakeholder capitalism in solving the big problems of the world.
What is stakeholder capitalism? In 2019, the Business Roundtable, a club that includes most of America's largest corporations, declared that their role would no longer be just serving the owners of the company. From now on, CEOs would take on a moral role and a political role as well.
In January of 2020, the World Economic Forum basically came out with exactly the same thing the Business Roundtable had. They just called it something different. They called it a manifesto. and announce that this is the fourth industrial age, that the changes that are happening right now, the shift to stakeholder capitalism, is as important and on the scale of the shift to the Industrial Revolution. That this is a major shift where all the companies are moving toward a regenerative economy that's based on justice and sustainability. The companies who actually make that transition will be the ones who succeed, and therefore the ones you want to put your money into. And we're trying to help all these companies. Really, it's really through a birth process of a whole new economy.
From now on, companies will focus on achieving ESG goals. How do we know how well they're doing in this? Well, a number of rating agencies have stepped up to give ESG ratings. And not only to companies, but also to countries and even to U.S. states. ESG ratings let investors know who is ESG compliant and who isn't. And for those who get a bad ESG rating, the agencies have ESG consultants who, for a fee, will help get those ESG scores up where they should be. So this is the plan. Get companies on board, get them in line with the agenda, and together we solve the problems of climate change, inequality, racism, and gun violence. How do we know ESG is the way to go? Simple, because we're all going there. And yet, despite all the best intentions of the ESG industry, there are dissonant voices who say they're concerned.
In a free market system, corporations, companies, business entities, their sole purpose is supposed to be to make money for their shareholders. It forces companies to go out and figure out how they can serve their fellow human being, whether that be growing food, cooking food, producing goods and services that you want to buy. Well, fascism takes that idea and it allows you to keep the private ownership component in a way, but it also hijacks the purpose of the company away from making profit, away from serving the consumer, and toward government-approved goals. And that's what we're seeing with the ESG. ESG are these nebulous concepts of environmental benefits and social benefits and governance, etc. These are goals that are set by governments and policymakers primarily.